Good morning and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Sue Perez. HIV and AIDS is still a very important issue. We don't hear about it every day on television, but we need to know just as much as ever before about it. So we have two guests with us today that are going to address this issue. Maybe you'd like to put a tape in and record this for a future session with your children. We're going to address youth and this issue. It's just going to be really informative, so I would encourage you to do what it takes to get this knowledge down. We want to welcome this morning Kathi Winter. You're a board member with He Intends Victory, and then Corey Norland, you're vice president of He Intends Victory.
Yes.
Ladies first. Kathi, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
And maybe both of you can address what He Intends Victory is.
He Intends Victory is a group that saved my life,
Okay.
honestly, about 13 years ago.
All right.
And that was when I first found out I was infected with HIV.
Okay.
And I needed a place to go to be loved because the churches weren't ready for it.
Okay.
And I found a support group, and it was right here in Orange County. And I started to attend and have on and off, and now I'm on the board because it is an international organization that reaches out for care and compassion and offers hope
Okay.
for people living with HIV.
All right. And how about you, Corey?
It's an international organization, but we also have a very local focus. And there's opportunities for people to become involved in supporting the ministry and learning more about the ministry just by checking it out and becoming educated.
Okay.
We have a support group that meets locally, and it offers a bit of a different perspective maybe than some of the other support groups that are available. And there's basically a support group for everyone when it comes down to it in this field. And ours will offer a little bit of a different slant maybe than some others.
All right. Well, before we go on, we need to define what HIV is, what AIDS is, because there's, I think, still a misunderstanding out there.
I think so
and
too.
premature conclusion as to how it's contracted and things. But let's start off, maybe Corey, you can define HIV and AIDS for us.
All right, well, HIV, the H is human, I is immunodeficiency, and V would stand for virus.
Okay.
So that is the initial virus that a person would come in contact with. AIDS is something similar yet different. HIV and AIDS are not the same thing. And somebody can contract HIV, but take many years until it develops into AIDS. And that would be due to not only just the time it takes for it to progress to that point, but also medications that are slowing the progression as the medications improve. But the AIDS virus, or when somebody has AIDS, and that stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, that is when somebody has reached a point where their immune system is so compromised that they're not able to fight off some of the infections that people with a healthy immune system could fight off.
Would it be accurate to say then for our viewers that AIDS is the full-blown stage of HIV, or does it come onto something separately? Kathi, go ahead.
AIDS is actually a diagnosis that the medical field has given to people who have 200 T cells or less, or T cells are the helper cells that fight within our immune system.
Okay.
Or that have acquired one of the opportunistic infections that can kill you. There's a certain form of tuberculosis, another type of pneumonia, and there's other types of cancers now are very, very on the rise, I'm afraid, with people with AIDS, and that's what's going to kill you. You don't die from AIDS, you die from the infections that you can't warn off because your immune system is so depleted. The reason I think it's important, a lot of people in the medical field say HIV/AIDS, HIV/AIDS, and people think, well, it's the same thing. If you're diagnosed with HIV like I am, I don't ever plan on getting AIDS, God willing, because of the meds and because I'm lucky enough to live in America, but only 5% of the world's population have the meds. So most of the world is still dying of AIDS, but we are blessed to have an opportunity here to keep our health strong and to have good nutrition and to take care. And when I go overseas and I tell people I've been infected for almost 13 years, they can't believe it because internationally people will die much sooner.
Okay. Now, well, I don't want to jump ahead too much here because I want to make it a good informative session here. Maybe Corey, you can address this one too. Then, how does one contract HIV?
There are 4 fluids that contain the virus, and those are 2 of those fluids are those that are exchanged during sexual contact, both from a man or from a woman. And then it is also carried in the blood, which is why initially blood transfusions here in America were such a catalyst for it being contracted and spread. And it can also be spread when a mother who is HIV positive and has had her baby, if she chooses to nurse her baby, her milk carries the virus and can give it to the child that way. And these are all things, all of those methods of transmission are 100% preventable.
And those are the only way that it's transmitted. And I say that because people worry about saliva and spitting and coughing and hugging and toilet seats, and there is absolutely not one evidence in 25 years of knowing that this virus exists, it's probably been around longer, that casual contact has resulted in contracting HIV. It's pretty intentional, the act. Not that you know you're going to get it, but you have to do something very specific in order to contract HIV. That's why, like Corey said, it's preventable. And that's why we speak out.
Now, and you made a good point there, Kathy. It's just the conclusions that people have jumped to. And I think you'd agree, maybe the fear, and fear comes from a lack of knowledge.
That's right.
So with what you're giving us today, we're helping not just prevent, but maybe for someone just to learn to deal with it, or how they acquired it. You mentioned the term meds. We want to make sure we clarify that's part of your jargon, but that is the medications that are prescribed.
Some people call them a cocktail.
A cocktail.
But they're oftentimes a series of all new combinations of medicines. And I think it's important that the listening audience know that it's not just taking a pill here or there. Some of us have taken up to 35, 40 pills a day. It's very expensive. And even though I have insurance from my business, I still have a high copay. So it costs me almost $1,000 alone a month just to take the meds. And a lot of people don't have that kind of income. So California does have a program called ADAP, as many states do, which is an opportunity for free medication for those on Medi-Cal. But the funding has dropped, the interest in the virus has dropped, the personal funding has dropped, and so consequently there are people that are not getting the medicines now, and that they will die if they don't get them.
Corey, obviously even in Kathy's situation, people are living longer with the virus. What is it you tell people in the area of being careful? Even knowing they have it, I mean, what is it, a change of lifestyle? What do you preach out there?
Well, before somebody becomes infected, in fact, a lot of times I'll share in schools and I'll educate students. And students today, at least in the schools I've spoken at, are far more educated than most of the adults that I come into contact with. And that part's great. The bad part is they're not necessarily, they don't have a healthy fear of the virus. They're not too concerned about, they know there's medications, they know that you can live with it. They see celebrities or people who they know who may be living much longer and looking healthy, but they're not realizing that it's not really a manageable condition. To somebody living with the virus, that makes you cringe, because a manageable condition, it sounds like a walk in the park or like something that's not a big deal. And in reality, people need to have a bit of a healthy fear that this is something that completely alters your life and it changes the options that you have. Now, to someone who is infected, that's not the end of the road, and you don't want to sound hopeless and offer this. It's two different audiences. One who you want to encourage to be somewhat afraid of it and respect it, and another that you want to offer them hope and say, this isn't the end of the road for you. You can treat it. We're not going to call it manageable, but it's something that you can exist with and can have a full, rich life with.
I want to speak to the part of the disease that isn't medical, but that's psychological and spiritual, because this is a disease of brokenness. And most people that have the disease, while they can manage it medically, emotionally and physically, it's still a huge stress because there's a lot of stigma. People still look at me and say, how could you let that happen? And when I talk to people in youth, like when we go out into the schools, we'll speak to the denial issue. You know, youth already do think that they're very strong and very, you know, impenetrable and everything. Well, I thought that. And I'm a middle-aged woman, had gone through divorce, and I was just not smart. And I didn't know how the virus was really contracted. And so that's why we want to speak out. But we want to speak to this issue of denial. You know, not in my backyard, not about me. It'll never happen. It doesn't matter your education. It doesn't matter your finances. It doesn't matter your color. Although I will say people of color right now are getting hit much harder with it. So, but the truth is the virus is not a respecter of persons. It will go anywhere, and all it takes is once.
Now, let me go back a little bit, and let's speak to that area that you mentioned where stigma is concerned. Do you find yourself like you feel like you have to tell people? No?
It's really not anybody's business. Unless I choose to share it as part of my life. It's a big part of my life because I've taken it on as a ministry, and I'm an advocate. And I want people not to make the same mistake I made. So in that way I might bring it up. But in my business life, for example, my business colleagues don't know. They don't need to know. Now maybe they'll be watching this TV show, and that's okay. I've chosen to take that risk. But it's not something, I'm not Kathi and I have HIV. I'm Kathi, a person.
It's not your middle
name. And I happen to live with a life-defining illness, though. And it is important. So I like to mention it more as a prevention message.
Why don't, Corey, maybe you could speak to what Kathi just mentioned here, a life-defining illness. What does that mean? And how does it change things?
How doesn't it change things?
Okay.
You know, it's something that...
I'll let you answer that.
Initially, it's information that's handed to you that changes the way everything looks. You know, it changes the way the clouds look. It changes the way you feel when you wake up in the morning. It changes how much more you know, for some people it may make them appreciate life more. It may make them take a second opportunity to really live and make something of their life. And hopefully that's what people will be inspired to do. But for others, it is something that is so devastating that they never recover from it. That information, like Kathi was saying, it defines them. It becomes them, and they can't separate themselves from it. They can't get out of their own skin, and it can affect their psychological condition so intensely that they become a completely different person.
Do you think that's why people lose the battle? Because it gets to them mentally? It
certainly can be part of it. And I know people that have had it so long that they're just worn down and they just really want to give up. And it's not like we say you shouldn't go there, but we all know psychologically if we have a positive attitude, if we have hope, if we have a faith, that changes the way the disease can contract our virus, you know, our immune system. If I'm feeling good and feeling up and my endorphins are strong and I'm saying it's okay, the virus can't get me half as fast. Now, both of us lead support groups here in Orange County, and we want to invite people to know about that. So, because we have people that are affected and infected, and we come together on a weekly basis. We have alternative weeks so that every week there is a support group for someone to come to and ask questions and get educated, but also share their heart, share their pain. I think it's really an important thing for people to do, to come out and talk about it and not hide in the closet.
Now, we're going to shift over in a little bit, but before we do, I want to make sure we answer some of these other questions. You mentioned earlier that it is costly for some of the medications. does everyone have equal access, though, for for the cocktail, so to speak?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
People with insurance, like myself, have access to the medications and all the new medications that come up, because there's constantly, they're doing a fabulous job of bringing in new medications, but they are very, very expensive. So those that are in a lower income bracket, and that's why we say the disease is now hitting economically as well, is they don't have access to all the new medicine and all the new changes. See, the virus mutates all the time, and it's very smart. It's very evil, actually, and it figures out ways to get around the medicine, like viruses do, and that's the danger of taking on, too many antibiotics. Well, the same with our medication. If the virus figures out a way around it, then we have to shift and go into a whole nother medication, and oftentimes the meds make you really sick. I have neuropathy in my feet, which is painful, and I have to take medicine every 3 hours so I can walk. And that kind of thing is a result of just the medicine. So it's like Corey said, it's so not a walk in the park. It's something we don't want anyone to ever have to get, and it just is really an important message.
Corey, what are some of the things you do to cope with the diagnosis, besides lending support to others?
Some of the things I did initially, I became extreme in my response, and I got my skydiving license. I went backpacking through Europe. I did things, I went and got a couple tattoos. I did things that made me really feel alive that I wouldn't have done otherwise, and they were a bit unusual maybe, but they made me feel very much alive. And those are just some things just about anyone can do to realize, hey, I'm still here. I'm going to be here for as long as God has me here. I'm not planning on going anywhere soon. And those all helped initially. And then now it's just investing in people and investing in relationships. My perspective has become one of people matter, people are important, instilling hope, instilling purpose, and getting people to really come to a place of getting beyond the diagnosis and moving on to the next stage in their lives. Not just closing the chapter of their diagnosis, but closing the chapter of their lives altogether. Some people want to do that. Instead, I just want to throw that whole mentality out and help them move on.
Yeah, okay. Now, Kathi, you mentioned that no one really dies of AIDS.
Well, AIDS, you don't die of AIDS, you die of the result that your body cannot warn off infection.
Okay.
So AIDS doesn't kill you. What kills you is the fact that AIDS has depressed your immune system so much that you get tuberculosis, or you get pneumonia, or you get cancer. And that was what will kill you. Now, they say people die of AIDS, but I'm being very medically specific here.
Okay.
It is the opportunistic infection that kills people, not the virus itself.
Okay.
But the virus itself enables your body to be so depleted that you can die.
So, in other words, also then something, if you had never been diagnosed with HIV, then it's something that could have happened to you later on in life, that you may have gotten or something like that would have come on you, but now, because it did, you're not able to fight it off then.
Okay, I think what you're saying is that once you contract HIV, you can live for a long time without even knowing you have it, and that's the danger in Orange County.
So they're not immediate symptoms then.
Oh, for every person like us that know we have it, there could be 3 to 5 others in Orange County alone. Not to mention San Bernardino and San Diego, that are walking around not knowing they have it. They're spreading the disease. They're not getting the meds. And they have never been tested. And I think we've really underestimated the value of testing. Corey has a website that we wanted to mention about testing. You want to tell them about it, Corey?
Yeah, there's a testing site, and I just found this going through the search engine, and you can do that on just about any search engine, but it's hivtest.org. And when you pull that one up,
really
you type in your zip code, and it shows you all different testing sites within a radius that you select. And some are free, some are it tells you what's anonymous, and gives you all different options.
Okay.
Anonymous is important. Can I say something to that? Because people are afraid, oh, well, I'm going to be reported. My name's going to be reported. If when you go to be tested, you make sure that your testing is anonymous and not just confidential, then although the stat is reported to the state, because by now we have a law that says we have to report HIV as well as AIDS, but it never is tied in necessarily to your name.
Okay.
And so people can have anonymous testing, and I think that's so important.
All right. Let me shift over now. Corey, I want you to answer this question. You mentioned earlier that maybe the youth need to have a healthy fear of, well, people in general, but we'll talk about the youth, of HIV. From your experience, do you think they're really aware of how it's contracted?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
I really do. Here in the U.S., at least in the schools I've had the opportunity to speak at in Southern California, I found that the education is sufficient when it comes down to talking about transmission. I think those students, many of them were practically yawning with the repeat of information when I would give them the basics, because they've heard it so many different times on so many different levels, not just in the classroom, but at home on television, in different programs from different celebrities or somebody who is upfront about it. But information alone isn't enough for people to necessarily really get it. The smart ones get it. The smart ones take that and they apply it. But a lot of others, either they're apathetic, they really just don't care because they think they can be treated and they'll live just fine with it, and others feel invincible and think that they'll never, it's just, it would never hit me. I'm mostly safe. I'm not too high risk.
So how do you drive home the reality then? Of being, you know, how you can contract it?
You know, the sad thing is it often takes knowing somebody or getting that positive test result before the reality hits. For a lot of people, that's what it ultimately takes, and I wish I could say that there's such a, you know, this is the answer and this is what we all need to get, but the bottom line is, until people get to know somebody and meet somebody and have a respect for what it's doing in somebody else's life, oftentimes it's meaningless to them.
Is there anything you say, like, to give a strong warning? I mean, you know, you know, you both are advocates and impassioned with wanting to help in this area. So
I say, look at me. I could be in your church. I could be standing in line next to you. I don't look like someone that fits the stereotype. I've never done IV drug use. I've not had multiple sex partners. It just was a one-time situation. And so what I want to do is put a name and a face to the disease and say, if I can have it, if I can get it, so can any of the people watching the show. And I think that's the best warning we can give. We made a mistake, we got it, but other people don't have to. And the biggest thing is to lift that denial as much as possible, to say, hey, it can happen to anybody.
What role, Kathy, do parents play in informing their kids and working with their kids and training them?
I find that the students whose parents have talked about it at home, it gets away from just the medical issue of how it's transmitted and how it's not. I find that parents who are involved in perhaps their church and in that community, and where the issue has been brought up, and they've talked about it and they have an understanding, it's like anything. You don't want your kids to start smoking, you don't want your kids to get pregnant, you don't want your kids to get HIV. They should all be discussed, and parents make a huge difference. But parents, people my age, also are not educated as much. We're less informed than the students are. So when parents try to talk about it, the kids go, oh yeah, I've heard all about that. The parents need to drive it home. But what about the denial? What about the issues of the STDs alone and how they're transmitted? In other words, talking about that, and these shows help so much.
Yeah. Did you want to mention something?
Well, that's what you're saying is a good point. I think today parents getting educated themselves is going to help earn the respect of their kids, because students today, even in elementary school, are knowing so much more about the virus. And if parents don't, if they're saying all of those things that aren't true and all those things that initially we thought were true and they weren't, just because they shut down and never got educated from that point on, then their kids aren't going to respect anything they have to say about it, and it's going to be that much less of a big deal to them to talk, to think about them really getting HIV and AIDS. But if parents will truly do some research, get some hard facts, and really learn about it, maybe go out and meet some people living with it, and that'll be that much more impacting for their students, for their kids, to be able to respect them.
I think it's, we're trying to put on educational forums in Orange County. And this is an invitation to anyone and everyone. They're free, and they're 2-hour sessions where we stand up and give a testimony about how we got it, and other people too within our group. And then also we have an HIV 101 education, and then most important, we have questions and answers. And that's coming up. We have one on July 27th at Life Church in Mission Viejo. That's a Thursday night from 6:30 to 8:30, and we would just like to invite people to come.
Sure.
Come and learn about it, or come and ask questions. You know, when you can ask questions of a person living with it rather than just a medical, it brings it home more.
What are some of the reactions that you've had from family, friends, people that you inform them of your status?
Well, when I first found out I was positive, certain members of...
Let me interrupt you by asking this. Did you have symptoms? How did you end up finding out?
I found out because my fiance at the time was taken to the hospital and given 3 days to live because he had pneumocystis pneumonia. In other words, he had AIDS. And the doctor said, "Have you been tested?" And I said, "Yes," and I tested negative. And he said, "How long ago?" Because all it takes is one time. And I think 50% of the population in the United States don't find out until they're already at the stage of AIDS. And that's ridiculous, because we can be tested and find out and have up to 10 years or 12 years, even 15, before we have to get to that stage. But that's how I found out. And it was very devastating to me, because the thought of losing him, and then the thought of the fact that he had given me the virus, and he had been tested and was told, but he denied it. And he never thought he was going to give it to me. But that's the denial of it. So anyway, that's your question was what happened with family, and
what is the
what kind of reaction. Some members of my family wouldn't let me come to their house, and they didn't want me to eat off the same utensils or use the toilet, or in the church that I was in, they told me that they were sorry that I was sick, but please don't mention it, because they weren't coping. They weren't ready to cope with it. Now I go to a church that has it as a real initiative. It's called the HIV Initiative, and it's high time. And I think the church has awakened to the fact that we have to talk about it.
Do you have an experience you want to share, Corey?
Mine was completely opposite. My friends and family became educated, became advocates with me, and have been incredibly supportive and loving. And my parents have even traveled with me numerous places and spoken and shared their perspective as a parent. And that's very impacting when the three of us can get up on stage and show the restoration that's taken place within our own home, and the love that is evident from a parent toward a child. And I don't take that for granted, because I see many youth today, a couple recently who were not allowed back in their homes, partially because of the virus, partially because of what may have led them to be contracting it. At the same time, my heart grieves for those youth and for those adults who experience the same rejection. And I can't understand that rejection because I haven't had to face it, so I've been very fortunate.
We just have a few seconds here, but in a couple words, how are you doing?
I think mentally that's the best part, and spiritually I'm doing great. Physically I have my ups and downs, but for the most part I'm in a really good place because I'm taking care of myself.
Good. Kathy, a few seconds.
I'm blessed.
You're blessed?
I'm blessed. I'm strong. The virus is under control, and I just thank God for every day.
Good to have both of you. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telephone dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.